3 days after the Fangbeast incident, Valo 9 had returned to normal operations. But nothing would ever be quite the same for the aliens, who had witnessed what a small Earth cat could do. The trade negotiations resumed in the Grand Diplomatic Chamber, and Yuna took her seat at the human delegation's table, with Machi resting in a carrier beside her chair. No one laughed this time. Representatives from a dozen species had gathered to discuss commerce and cooperation. But every eye kept drifting to the orange tabby, who cleaned her whiskers with obvious boredom. Torvik opened the session with formal greetings to all delegations. And when he reached the human representative, he paused to add something that made the entire chamber fall silent. Before we begin our official business, I wish to recognize the service performed by our human colleague and her companion during the recent emergency. He turned to face Yuna directly. The creature called Machi demonstrated courage and skill that would honor any warrior of any species. And the Keleth formally acknowledged this debt. The statement sent ripples of surprise through the assembled diplomats who had not been present during the crisis. Yuna inclined her head in acceptance and replied with careful diplomatic language. The humans of Earth are grateful for your recognition, Ambassador. And we hope this incident has shown that our species has much to offer despite our recent arrival among the stars. The negotiations proceeded smoothly after that, with far more respect shown to human proposals than Yuna had expected based on her pre-mission briefings. Species that had previously dismissed Earth's representatives as insignificant newcomers now listened carefully to every word she spoke during a break. Between sessions, Salavos approached Yuna with a request that would have seemed absurd a week earlier. I have been researching your cat since the incident, the Minari merchant admitted with obvious embarrassment. I would like to understand more about how humans and these creatures coexist. Yuna smiled and lifted Macha from her carrier, holding the cat where Sayla could observe her more closely. You can ask her yourself, Yuna offered. She does not bite unless she wants to. Sayla extended one delicate limb and touched Macha's fur with extreme caution, then pulled back in surprise when the cat began to purr. It makes a sound, Sayla observed with wonder. Is that a warning? No, that means she is content, Yuna explained. Cats purr when they are happy or comfortable. Sometimes when they are healing from injuries as well. More aliens gathered around as word spread that the human was allowing contact with her deadly companion. And soon Yuna found herself giving an impromptu lecture on feline behavior to a captivated audience. Dr. Henil Cho joined her and provided scientific context that the aliens found easier to process than simple descriptions. Cats have been studied extensively by human scientists, Henil explained to the group. We know they have complex emotional lives. They form genuine bonds with their human companions, and they are capable of recognizing individual faces and voices. But they remain hunters, a Drothian officer observed as he watched Machi track a flying insect across the room. How do humans feel safe sleeping near creatures that could kill them? Yuna laughed softly at the question. Cats killed the things that used to kill us, she replied. The pests that spread disease, the snakes that hid in our fields, the rats that ate our food supplies. Our cats protected us from all of these threats. She stroked Macha's fur as the cat continued watching the insect with predatory focus. We feel safe with them because we have thousands of years of history, proving that cats see humans as family rather than prey. Krethvolan had been listening from nearby, and he stepped forward with a question of his own. The reports from the maintenance bay have been analyzed by our security experts, he said. They concluded that your cat used tactics normally seen only in highly trained military units. He pulled up a holographic display showing Machi's movement patterns during the hunt. She identified weak points, exploited blind spots, maintained constant pressure while avoiding direct confrontation, and delivered the killing strike only when victory was certain. The display showed the final moments of the Fangbeast, surrounded by dozens of approach vectors that had each resulted in another wound. Where did she learn to fight like this? Kreth asked with genuine curiosity. Yuna shrugged in a way that clearly unsettled the security chief. No one taught her. Yuna admitted, that knowledge is in her blood, passed down through millions of years of evolution. She held Machi up so everyone could see the small creature who had accomplished what armed soldiers could not. Every cat carries a perfect predator inside them. Yuna continued, humans just happened to be the species they decided to be friends with. The negotiations concluded successfully 2 days later, with humans securing trade agreements far more favorable than anyone had predicted. Yuna knew the Fangbeast incident had played a role in this outcome, and she made sure to give Machi extra treats during their journey home. A message arrived from Torvik as their transport departed from Valor 9, and Yuna read it with a smile spreading across her face. I have submitted a formal request to the Galactic Council, the ambassador had written. Earth and its creatures will be added to the Registry of Species, requiring special consideration in all diplomatic matters. A second message followed from Kreth Volon with an attachment that made Yuna laugh out loud. It was a copy of an official warning, now posted in the Galactic database under Earth's entry. Native fauna includes small ambush predators, colloquially known as cats. The warning read, do not engage based on assumptions of size or appearance. Extreme caution advised in all interactions. These creatures have demonstrated ability to kill prey significantly larger and more dangerous than themselves. Machi was asleep in her carrier, curled into a perfect orange ball with her tail wrapped around her nose. She looked exactly like what the aliens had first assumed. A soft, harmless creature that existed only for human companionship and comfort. But Yuna knew the truth now better than ever before. Somewhere inside that small furry body was a hunter older than human civilization. A predator that had chosen to walk beside her species through history as an ally, rather than a threat they had not domesticated. Cats at all. They had simply been lucky enough to earn their friendship. The transport jumped to faster than light speed and carried them toward Earth, toward home, toward a world where millions of these tiny perfect killers lived in harmony with the humans who loved them. Machi opened one green eye, confirmed that all was well, and went back to sleep. She had done her job, and now it was time to rest until the next hunt began. The artificial sunrise brought light back too. Valor 9, but no one in the security checkpoint had slept through the long night of watching the impossible hunt unfold on their scanners. Kreth Volon assembled his best armed response team and prepared to breach the maintenance bay where both signatures had remained motionless for the past 2 hours. The Fangbeast has not moved at all, one of his officers reported with obvious nervousness. Either it is dead or waiting to ambush anyone who enters. And the small creature? Kreth asked as he checked his weapon for the 3rd time. Still alive based on the thermal reading. Sitting approximately 4 meters from the large signature. Yuna insisted on joining the response team despite every argument against it. And in the end, Kreth allowed her to follow at a safe distance. Behind the armed officers, Hanel came as well with his medical kit ready for whatever they might find inside. The team moved through the corridors with professional precision, clearing each intersection before advancing to the next. Evidence of the night's battle became visible as they approached the maintenance bay, with claw marks gouged into metal walls and dark stains that could only be blood. The beast came through here multiple times, one officer observed as he scanned the damage. It was searching for something, going in circles. Being led in circles, Hanel corrected quietly. There is a difference. They reached the sealed door to the maintenance bay, and Kreth signaled for everyone to take positions. The breach would happen fast and hard, with stun grenades followed by concentrated fire from multiple angles. Nothing could survive what they were about to unleash. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and the team surged inside with weapons raised and targeting systems active. What they found stopped them all in their tracks. The Fangbeast lay dead in the center of the bay, its massive body covered in dozens of small wounds that had bled freely throughout the night. Both of its eyes had been destroyed by precise strikes that must have come from directly in front of its face. Deep gashes marked the joints of its 6 legs where tendons had been severed with surgical accuracy. The killing blow was obvious even from a distance. A ragged tear across the creature's throat where something had ripped through the softer scales to reach the vital vessels beneath, and sitting calmly on top of the monster's corpse, grooming blood from her orange fur with casual indifference, was Machi. She looked up at the armed soldiers surrounding her and meowed once, as if asking what had taken them so long. Yuna pushed past the stunned officers and scooped her cat into her arms with tears streaming down her face. "You impossible creature," she whispered into the warm fur. "You brave, stupid, wonderful, impossible creature," Machi purred and rubbed her head against Yuna's chin, then resumed cleaning herself as if nothing unusual had happened. Kreth holstered his weapon and approached the Fangbeast's body with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of the universe had just shifted. "It bled out," he observed as his officers began documenting the scene. "The wounds are small individually, but there must be 50 or 60 of them." He knelt to examine the destroyed eyes and shook his massive head in disbelief. It could not see her coming at the end. She blinded it first, and then took her time finishing the job. Hanel was already scanning Machi with his medical equipment, and his findings made him laugh out loud. A few scratches on her paws from the armored scales, he reported with clear amazement. One small bite mark on her hind leg that did not even break the skin properly. "That is all." "The venom?" Sayla asked from the doorway where she had followed against orders. "What about the Fangbeast venom?" Hanel showed her the readout with obvious pride. "Her system is already neutralizing it. She will have a slight fever for a day or two and nothing more." News of the impossible victory spread through the station faster than any official announcement could travel. By the time Yuna carried Machi back to the residential sector, crowds had gathered along their route to see the tiny creature that had killed a monster. Aliens who had laughed at her the day before now watched in respectful silence, and more than a few stepped back when Machi turned her green eyes in their direction. Torvik was waiting outside her quarters with his remaining warriors, all of them bearing fresh bandages from their failed encounter with the Vlash. Fangbeast, the mighty Keleth, who had mocked her so thoroughly, now stood with his head bowed in a gesture Yuna recognized. "As formal apology, I was wrong," Torvik said simply. "We were all wrong, and I ask your forgiveness for the disrespect I showed to you and your companion." Yuna accepted his apology with grace and invited him inside to speak further. Machi settled onto her favorite shelf and watched the large reptilian predator with the same calm assessment she had shown to everything else. "Tell me about these creatures," Torvik requested as he lowered himself carefully onto a seat designed for smaller species. "Tell me how humans came to share their lives with such things." Yuna prepared warm drinks for both of them while she considered how to explain something that humans took for granted. 10,000 years ago, our ancestors lived in small settlements and grew food that attracted pests, she began. Mice and rats would eat our grain stores and spread disease through our populations. Torvik nodded, as this was a problem many species faced during their early development. Cats discovered that these settlements were full of easy prey. Yuna continued. They began hunting near human homes, and our ancestors noticed that the pest populations dropped wherever cats were present. She sat across from him with Matcha visible on the shelf between them. We did not capture them or force them to stay. We simply stopped chasing them away. And over generations they moved closer and closer until they were living inside our homes. That they remain predators. Torvik observed as he watched Matcha groom herself with claws that had torn through armored scales. They could turn on you at any moment. Una smiled and shook her head. They could. That they choose not to. And that choice is renewed every day they wake up and decide to stay with us. She reached up to stroke Matcha's fur, and the cat leaned into her touch with a rumbling purr. We do not own cats. Ambassador, we have an agreement with them. They protect our homes from pests, and we provide them with food and warmth and affection. Torvik was quiet for a long moment as he processed this information. Among the Kelith, we believe that the measure of a species can be found in the creatures they bond with, he said finally. We bond with war beasts because we value strength and ferocity. He looked at Machi with new eyes. I thought humans bonded with weak creatures because humans were weak. But I was wrong about what your cats truly are. And perhaps I was wrong about humans as well. Una met his gaze steadily. Perhaps you were, she agreed without malice. The security checkpoint fell silent as everyone processed what Hanel had just said, and Una felt her heart racing with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. That is absurd. Kreth growled as he studied the scanner readings. The Fangbeast is an apex predator from one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. And your creature weighs less than 5 kilograms. Size is not everything. Hanel replied calmly as he watched the two signatures move through the station's hidden spaces. Let me tell you what that small creature actually is. He pulled up data on his personal device and projected images that made the aliens lean forward with reluctant curiosity. Earth humans call them cats. Hanel began. They look soft and harmless because they have adapted to live alongside us. But make no mistake about their true nature. The images show cats in various poses that seemed innocent enough, curled up on furniture and playing with toys and grooming themselves in patches of sunlight. These are ambush predators. Hanel continued. They have retractable claws that stay razor sharp because they never touch the ground, and their teeth are designed to sever spinal cords with a single bite. He switched to images of cats hunting, and these were very different. From the peaceful domestic scenes, a cat launched itself at a bird with explosive speed that blurred the camera. Another dragged prey twice its size through tall grass, and a third stood over a pile of kills that numbered in the dozens. On Earth, cats have driven entire species to extinction. Hanel explained with the matter-of-fact tone of a scientist presenting data. They kill billions of animals every year, not just for food, but for practice, for pleasure, for reasons we still do not fully understand. Sayla's compound eyes reflected the images with visible distress. But they are so small. She protested weakly. How can something so small be dangerous? They do not need to be large. Una answered, finding her voice at last. Cats evolved to hunt creatures much bigger than themselves through patience and precision. She took over the presentation from Hanel and showed the aliens footage of wild cats bringing down prey that outweighed them by a factor of 10 or more. They stalked their target for hours or even days. Una explained, they watch and wait and learn every weakness, every blind spot, every moment of vulnerability. The scanner showed Matcha's signature still circling the Fangbeast in the darkness of the maintenance tunnels. When they finally attack, they strike at the eyes, the throat, the joints, all the places where size and armor do not matter. Kreth made a rumbling sound that might have been grudging respect. Even if that is true, the Fangbeast has venomous fangs that can kill with a single scratch. He pointed out, one hit and your predator becomes prey. Hanel smiled in a way that made the aliens uncomfortable. Cat lover enzymes are remarkably effective at neutralizing toxins, he explained. We discovered this when humans began colonizing new worlds. And our cats survived exposure to venoms that killed much larger animals. He pulled up more data showing cats that had been bitten by venomous snakes and other dangerous creatures on Earth, walking away with nothing more than swelling at the wound site. They are not immune to everything. Hanal admitted, but they are far more resistant than their size would suggest. And more importantly, they almost never get hit in the first place. The group watched the scanner in tense silence as the night cycle continued and the two signatures kept dancing through the station's hidden spaces. The Fangbeast's movements were erratic and aggressive, lunging at shadows and crashing through obstacles in its drugged rage. But the small signature moved with liquid grace that seemed almost impossible every time the monster stopped to rest or search for easier prey. Machi circled closer from a different angle. She is testing its reactions. Yuna realized with sudden clarity, learning how fast it can turn, how far it can reach, where its sensors cannot detect her. This is not possible. Torvik's voice came from the entrance, and everyone turned to see the Calith ambassador limping into the checkpoint with bandages covering wounds on his arms and chest. He had clearly encountered the Fangbeast himself and barely survived the experience. I watched that creature tear through 3 of my best warriors in seconds. Torvik continued as he collapsed into a seat. Nothing that small can threaten it. Yuna met his golden eyes without flinching. Machi does not need to threaten it, she said quietly. She just needs to never stop. Hours passed as the station remained in lockdown and the bizarre hunt continued in the darkness between walls. Reports came in from sensors throughout the maintenance grid, painting a picture that grew stranger with each update. The Fangbeast was slowing down, its movements becoming less coordinated, and more desperate small blood trails appeared in several locations. None of them from the cat. It is being bled. Kreth observed with disbelief. Something is cutting it open piece by piece. Hanal nodded, as if this confirmed his expectations. Cats do not fight fair, he explained. They do not charge in for a killing blow like the Calith would. They make small wounds and then disappear before retaliation is possible. He traced the pattern of blood trails on the station map, a slash across the face to blind one eye, a bite to the ankle to slow its movement, scratches along the flank to cause pain and confusion. Death by 1,000 cuts. Yuna whispered, remembering an old Earth expression. The Fangbeast's signature suddenly stopped moving in a large maintenance bay near the station's core systems. Everyone held their breath as they watched. Machi's tiny signature approached from 3 different directions in rapid succession, striking and retreating and striking again. The monster thrashed and roared with sounds that echoed through the ventilation system, but it could not catch its tormentor. The poison in its system is working against it now. Hanal observed. It should be resting and conserving energy, but the rage compounds are forcing it to keep fighting even as it bleeds out. And the cat knows this. Kreth added with something approaching awe. It is waiting for the beast to exhaust itself. Torvik watched the scanner with an expression Yuna could not read. His earlier mockery completely forgotten. Your people keep these creatures as companions, he said slowly. You live with them in your homes. You let them near your children. Yuna smiled despite everything. They like us, she replied simply. They chose to live with humans 10,000 years ago, and they have been part of our families ever since. Chose. Torvik repeated the word as if it tasted strange. You did not domesticate them. No. Yuna confirmed. They domesticated themselves. And we were smart enough to accept the arrangement. The night cycle was nearly over when the Fangbeast's signature finally stopped moving altogether, and Machi's tiny dot settled down nearby, as if waiting for the station's dawn. Overnight, Part 2. The emergency lockdown transformed Valor 9 from a bustling trade hub into a maze of sealed corridors and terrified residents hiding behind reinforced doors. Yuna watched the live security feeds on her console as teams of armed personnel swept through the station in search of the escaped Fangbeast. And what she saw made her stomach turn with dread. The creature appeared on camera for only brief moments, but those glimpses were enough to understand why everyone was so afraid. It moved on 6 powerful legs covered in thick armored plates that deflected energy weapons. And its head was a nightmare of fangs and sensory organs designed for hunting in absolute darkness. The Fangbeast stood nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulder and stretched over 4 meters from nose to tail. And every centimeter of its body had evolved for one purpose alone. It was a killer without equal. And the poison in its system had stripped away any instinct except the need to hunt and destroy. Yuna heard pounding on her door and nearly screamed before realizing it was someone seeking shelter rather than the monster itself. She checked security camera outside her quarters and saw Salavos the Minari merchant along with 3 other aliens she did not recognize. "Please let us in," Sayla begged through the intercom. "The creature has entered this residential block and our quarters are not secure." Yuna opened the door immediately and ushered them inside, then sealed it behind them with every lock available. The group huddled together in the small living space while Machi watched them from her perch on a high shelf, her green eyes tracking each movement with predatory focus. The Keleth were supposed to handle this, one of the aliens complained bitterly. Torvik and his warriors boasted that they would kill the beast before it could harm anyone else. Sayla made a clicking sound that her translator rendered as bitter laughter. "The Keleth have failed," she reported grimly. 3 of their best warriors engaged the Fangbeast in Corridor 12, and all 3 are now in critical condition at the medical bay. She pulled up footage on her personal device and showed them the brief battle that had ended in disaster. The Keleth were indeed formidable predators in their own right, tall and strong with claws that could tear through metal. But the Fangbeast had moved with speed that seemed impossible for something so large. It had struck all 3 warriors in less than 10 seconds, its venomous fangs punching through their scales like paper before they could land a single blow. Now it had vanished into the ventilation system where no one could follow, and it could emerge anywhere at any time. A soft chime announced another visitor, and Yuna checked the camera to see Dr. Hamilcho standing outside with a medical kit in his hands. She recognized him from the station roster as the human veterinarian assigned to inspect animal transports, and she let him in without hesitation. "I heard there were humans in this sector," Hanel explained as he caught his breath. "I thought we should stick together until this crisis is resolved." He was older than Yuna by perhaps 15 years, with gray streaks in his black hair and calm eyes that suggested he had seen his share of emergencies. Hanel noticed Machi on her shelf and smiled despite the dire circumstances. "Beautiful cat," he observed with genuine appreciation. "Orange tabby. Maybe 7 or 8 years old, judging by her build." 7 years exactly, Yuna confirmed. And she felt a small measure of comfort in meeting someone who understood what Macha truly was. The aliens in the room paid no attention to their exchange, too focused on the security feeds that showed the Fangbeast's path of destruction through the station. It had killed 2 more security officers and injured countless others, and nothing seemed capable of stopping its rampage. Mache suddenly jumped down from her shelf and began pacing along the walls, with her nose twitching and her ears rotating like satellite dishes. "Your animal is agitated," Sayla observed with clear nervousness. "Does it sense something we cannot?" Hanel watched the cat with professional interest and nodded slowly. "Cats have extraordinary senses," he explained in a tone that suggested he was lecturing students. "They can hear frequencies far beyond what most species can detect, and their ability to sense vibrations through solid surfaces is remarkable. It is just a small pet." One of the other aliens scoffed. What could it possibly sense that our security equipment cannot? Hanel opened his mouth to respond, but stopped when Machi froze in place and stared at a specific section of wall with unblinking intensity. That wall connects to the main ventilation shaft. Yuna whispered as cold realization gripped her heart. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went dark as something massive moved through the ducts above their heads. Emergency lighting painted everything in dim red, and the sound of scraping metal grew louder with each passing second. "It found us," Sayla whimpered, and the aliens began to panic in their various ways. The scraping stopped directly above the sealed door, and for one terrible moment, everything was silent, except for the sound of heavy breathing from the frightened refugees. Then impact after impact shook the reinforced door as the Fangbeast began trying to force its way. Inside, the metal bent inward with each blow, and it was clear the barrier would not hold for long. "We need to evacuate," Hanel shouted over the noise. "Is there another exit from these quarters?" Yuna pointed to a small emergency hatch in the ceiling that led to maintenance corridors. But it was too small for most of the aliens in the room. Only she and Hanel could fit through it. And perhaps Sayla, if she folded her limbs carefully. "Go," the largest alien commanded with grim acceptance. "We will hold the door as long as we can." Yuna grabbed her carrier from Machi but found it empty, and she spun around in desperate search of her cat. The small vent cover near the floor had been pushed aside. An orange fur disappeared into the darkness of the shaft beyond. "Machi, no!" Yuna screamed. But the cat was already gone. She tried to follow, but the vent was far too small for a human body, and Hanel had to physically pull her away as the main door finally buckled under the Fangbeast's assault. They fled through the ceiling hatch with Sayla close behind, leaving the others to face the monster alone. Yuna could hear the creature burst through the door, followed by sounds she would never be able to forget. She wanted to go back, but Hanel kept pushing her forward through the narrow maintenance tunnels until they reached a sealed security checkpoint. Kreth Volan was there with a squad of armed Drothians, and he ushered them inside the fortified position with urgent gestures. "Your cat," Yuna gasped as soon as she could speak. "My cat went into the ventilation system." Kreth checked his scanner, and his expression became troubled. "I have 2 life signatures in the maintenance grid," he reported with clear confusion. "One is massive, that would be the Fangbeast, but the other is very small and moving in the same direction. It is running away." Sayla concluded with something like relief. At least the creature will not catch something so fast in those tight spaces. But Hanel was staring at the scanner with an expression Yuna could not identify. "That is not running behavior," he said quietly. "Look at the pattern. The small signature is not fleeing from the large one." He traced the movement with his finger, and everyone watched as the tiny dots circled around and behind the massive one. "It is following," Hanel continued with growing wonder in his voice. "Your cat is stalking the Fangbeast." The transport shuttle docked at Galactic Trade Station Valor 9 with a soft hiss of pressurized air, and Yuna Park gathered her belongings with practiced efficiency before stepping into the crowded arrival terminal. She carried a standard travel case in one hand and a ventilated pet carrier in the other. And inside that carrier sat Machi, her orange tabby cat who had traveled across 3 star systems to be here with her today. The station was enormous beyond imagination. A spinning wheel of metal and glass that housed over 50,000 permanent residents and welcomed twice that number in daily visitors from across the known galaxy. Yuna had studied the layout during her journey, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer diversity of alien life that filled every corridor and platform. Tall reptilian caloths strode past on powerful legs, their scaled hides gleaming under artificial sunlight, while insectoid Minari clicked and chittered in small groups. Near merchant stalls, massive bear-like Drothians served as security personnel, and delicate Sylvani floated on wings that caught the light like living crystals. Una was one of only a handful of humans on the station, sent by Earth's diplomatic corps to negotiate new trade agreements that could benefit her entire species. She was young for such a responsibility at only 32 years old, but she had earned her position through years of dedicated study in xenobiology and cross-cultural communication. Her superiors believed her expertise would help bridge the gap between humanity and the older spacefaring civilizations that still viewed Earth's people as newcomers to the galactic stage. Machi meowed softly from her carrier, and Una paused to whisper reassurance through the mesh window. The cat had been her companion for 7 years now, officially registered as an emotional support animal for long-term space assignments, and Una could not imagine facing the stress of this mission without her familiar presence. A Caliph male stopped in front of her so suddenly that Una nearly collided with his chest, and she had to crane her neck backward to meet his golden eyes. He stood over 2 meters tall, with dark green scales and a crest of bony ridges that marked him as someone of importance among his kind. "You are the human representative?" he said in accented but clear English, and his tone carried neither warmth nor hostility. "I am Ambassador Torvik Dran, and I will be leading the Caliph delegation in our upcoming negotiations." Una bowed her head in the gesture of respect she had learned during her training and introduced herself with careful formality. Torvik's eyes drifted downward to the carrier in her hand, and his expression shifted to something that might have been confusion or disgust. "What is that creature?" he demanded. And several other caliphs behind him leaned closer to examine the carrier with obvious curiosity. "This is Machi," Una explained with a patient smile. "She is my cat, a companion animal from Earth." She tilted the carrier so they could see Machi more clearly, and the orange tabby blinked up at the massive reptilian faces with complete indifference. Torvik made a sound deep in his throat that Una's translator could not interpret, and then he laughed in a way that needed no translation at all. "This is what humans keep as companions," he said to his fellow Caliph, and they joined his laughter with hissing sounds of amusement. A tiny soft creature that could not survive a single day in the wild. Other aliens began to gather around them, drawn by the commotion, and soon Una found herself surrounded by dozens of curious and mocking faces. A Minari merchant named Sayla Voss pushed through the crowd on her 6 legs and peered at Machi with her compound eyes. "It has no claws to speak of," Sayla observed in her clicking voice. "No fangs, no armor, no venom. And it appears to be sleeping despite all this noise." "It is awake," Una corrected her gently. Cats simply do not react to things they consider unimportant. This statement brought another wave of laughter from the assembled aliens, and Torvik shook his massive head in what appeared to be genuine pity. "The Caliph bond with creatures worthy of our respect," he declared proudly. "Or beasts that can tear through armor and hunting companions that can track prey across continents. But humans bond with this helpless thing." He gestured at Machi with one clawed hand, and his warriors nodded in agreement behind him. "Perhaps this explains why your species has achieved so little in your short time among the stars," Torvik continued. "You are not predators at all, but caretakers of the weak and useless." Una felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept her voice steady when she replied, "Cats have been companions to humans for over 10,000 years. She said calmly, "They have earned their place in our homes and in our hearts, and I would not expect you to understand without knowing our shared history." Torvik waved away her words with clear dismissal and turned to leave with his delegation following close behind. "We will see you at the negotiation table, human," he called over his shoulder. "Try not to let your little pet distract you from more important matters." The crowd dispersed slowly, but Una could still hear scattered laughter and whispered comments about the foolish human and her pathetic creature. She stood alone in the terminal for a long moment before Kreth Volan approached her with surprisingly light steps for someone of his massive size. The Drothian security chief looked like a bear that had evolved to walk upright and wear a uniform, and his dark eyes held something that might have been sympathy. Do not let them discourage you, Kreth rumbled in his deep voice. The Galith mock everyone they consider beneath them, which includes most species in the galaxy. Yuna thanked him for the kind words and asked for directions to her assigned quarters, and Kreth personally escorted her through the winding corridors of the residential sector. Machi remained silent throughout the journey, her green eyes watching the strange new world beyond the carrier mesh with alert curiosity. Later that night, Yuna sat on her bed and let Machi explore the small apartment at her own pace while she reviewed her notes for the upcoming negotiations. The cat investigated every corner and surface before jumping onto the bed and curling into a warm ball against her leg. They do not know what you really are, Yuna whispered as she stroked the soft orange fur. But I do, and that is enough. The station lights dimmed to simulate night cycle, and Yuna was preparing for sleep when a strange sound echoed through the walls. It was distant and muffled, but something about it made Macha lift her head and flatten her ears against her skull. Before Yuna could react, alarms began to blare throughout the station, and an automated voice announced an emergency lockdown in all sectors. A second announcement followed moments later, and the words sent ice through her veins. "Attention all personnel," the voice declared. "A containment breach has occurred in Cargo Bay 7, and a dangerous creature has escaped into the station. All residents must remain in their quarters until further notice." Yuna pulled up the station news feed on her console and read the details with growing horror. The escaped creature was called a Fangbeast, an apex predator from a notorious death world, and it had been illegally transported by smugglers who were now dead. Worse still, the beast had been injected with rage-inducing compounds that made it impossible to sedate, and relentless in its aggression. It would hunt until it was killed, and so far it had already claimed 6 victims. Machi stood at the door of their quarters with her tail puffed to twice its normal size, staring at something only she could perceive in the darkness beyond.